is section 2 of the inheritance video. So what we're looking at in this section is we're going to be looking at the actual, variation inheritance, and we're looking at the actual inheritance for there. Again, this is key area 4, so we've got 2 more key areas after this to do, and then we'll be done unit 2 of multicellular organisms. So in this video, we'll be learning about what inheritance is and the different ways that we inherit traits from our parents, and then how to predict inheritance patterns. Now, the examples that we will be using are examples in animals, but remember this does apply to plants as well, so plants inherit in a similar way. And also, in addition to this, we can only really cover what the vocabulary in this unit means. We can't cover the individual examples of exam questions that they are going to ask, because that's very much a thing that you just need to basically sit down with a past paper question and work through. So we'd really recommend, after we've covered the vocabulary in this section, go and find past paper questions on inheritance and practice using the knowledge from this video in the situation of the past paper questions.
Okay, so by the end of this video, you should be able to do quite a few things. A lot of them are definitions. You should be able to define phenotype, genotype, allele, dominant, recessive, heterozygous, homozygous, P generation, F1 generation, F2 generation. Basically, a lot of words you need to be able to define, which is what we're going to focus on in this video.
The skill that you're going to have to use is the second one.
You should be able to use correct definitions. So basically, you should be able to understand these definitions to help you then solve a genetic problem based on what the question said in the definitions of it. You should be able to predict the genotype of offspring based on the phenotype of genotype of their parents, and you should be able to identify relationships within a family tree and use that to predict inheritance patterns as well.
Okay, so inheritance is how you gain the traits from your parents that make you you. Now, the idea behind the whole of inheritance is that everybody needs 2 copies of every gene. If we think about this idea of normal body cells are diploid, okay, this means that you have 2 full sets of chromosomes. You have one set that you get from your mum, one set that you get from your dad. Now, in that set of chromosomes is all the instructions on how to be a human. So inside the egg from the previous unit is all the instructions on how to be a human. Inside the sperm is all the instructions on how to be a human. We don't know why, but you need 2 sets of instructions in order to be a living creature thing, okay? So the idea is the father will hand over one set of instructions, the mother will hand over a second set of instructions. Those 2 sets of instructions will get together and fight it out to see what characteristics are going to show.
So in terms of some of the first keywords you need to know, we need to know about genes and alleles. So a gene is just a section of a chromosome responsible for a specific trait, and an allele is a specific form of that gene. So for example, you have a gene for hair colour, but the specific allele you might have is for ginger hair or blonde hair or brown hair. So gene is for hair colour, allele is for the specific version of it. Similarly, if you would have a gene for eye colour, you would have the specific allele that says it's blue eyes or brown eyes or green eyes.
Okay, genotype is the next definition. So your genotype is the combination of alleles an organism has for a specific trait. Now, it's written as letters. So if any question in an exam ever says, what is the genotype? You should be looking to write big A, little a, or big G, little g. It's a combination of letters that you are going to write for genotype.
It's always 2 letters.
It's always 2 letters, okay? And it might be one is capital, one is lowercase. It might be both are capital or both are lowercase. The capital or lowercase is showing whether that characteristic is dominant or recessive. It'll make a bit of sense in a little bit.
Okay, so like genotype, we have a similar word that's called phenotype. Now, your phenotype is your physical appearance. So your genotype says what genes you actually have. Your phenotype is what trait you actually show as a result of that genotype. So if you have the genotype, so say it's big B is the genotype for brown hair. Your phenotype is the fact you physically have brown hair. So your phenotype is generally written in words. You would write brown hair or blue eyes or whatever it is. So whatever the genotype actually results in you physically having as the appearance of that trait.
To give you an example for us directly is, I have got the phenotype for brown hair. My genotype, I don't know. I know I at least have 1 copy for a brown hair gene. I don't know what the second gene is because I have a blonde sister. It could be a blonde gene. It could be another brown hair gene. I do not know. However, for Miss Armstrong, I'm sure you can guess what she has, but the idea is she's got the phenotype for ginger hair. This means her genotype must only show ginger genes inside of it.
I don't even look that ginger in this video. You can see it a bit closer. Bad lighting.
You can see it from the little sort of slogan that we've got on the top of our videos. Okay. Do you?
Okay, so in terms of a dominant trait, the dominant allele is one which is always shown in the phenotype if it is remotely present in the genotype. So whether the genotype is 2 capital letters or 1 capital letter and 1 small letter, the dominant trait will always show because it is dominant. So as soon as there is 1 copy of it, it overpowers anything else. So a dominant letter, so a capital letter, is always present in that case.
A recessive trait or allele is one that only shows if there are 2 copies present in that genotype. So what this means is if a dominant gene is around, the recessive thing is not going to be able to express its phenotype. So the thing on the left, the little a, that is the thing that's going to show the recessive phenotype. Whereas the thing on the right, we've got a recessive allele accompanied by a dominant allele. That person, if they had big A, little a, they would show the dominant phenotype, but they'd be carrying the recessive allele.
Okay, so this just shows you what specific trait might appear depending on different genotypes. So on the left, we've got 2 capital letters, which says the dominant phenotype must show. In the middle, we have a capital letter and a small letter. Now, there are specific names for each of these we'll touch on in a second, but capital and a small letter, it's still dominant because there's still 1 capital, so that's still dominant. It's overpowering the little letter. And then on the right, we've got 2 little letters, so they are both recessive. So when that happens, that is the only time that a recessive phenotype will appear.
Okay, so let's touch on what does it mean if their letters look different or the same to each other. If someone is homozygous, what this means is they are going to have 2 copies of the same allele. Now what this means is they're going to be either 2 big letters or 2 small letters, not a mix of big and small. Okay, now if you think the word homo or the sort of prefix homo, it means same. So for example, a homosexual person is attracted to the same sex as each other. So the idea is homozygous means the same, and it's talking about genetics there for the zygous part, so same genetics. So if we look for the big B, that person is homozygous dominant. So that is how we can characterize their genotype, is we can say their genotype is homozygous dominant. Okay, whereas the person on the right hand side of the page there, little b, that is the person who's going to be homozygous recessive. So again, we can characterize that exact genotype as a homozygous recessive genotype.
Whereas if there is a big letter and a small letter, it is known as heterozygous. So hetero being that they are different, so it's different genetics, so they have 1 capital letter, 1 small letter. That is the only mix that you can have, is a capital and a small letter. There's no other options. So that means that they have 2 different alleles. So if we look at these 2 chromosomes here, they are homozygous for the pink gene because each of the 2 chromosomes has that pink gene, whereas they're heterozygous for the other one because they have 1 copy of an orange and 1 copy of a green. So heterozygous is 2 different alleles, homozygous is 2 of the same alleles.
Okay, now, how do you work out then if somebody is heterozygous or homozygous and they have children? How do you work out what their children are going to be? The way you work it out is through a monohybrid cross. Okay, so a monohybrid cross allows us to predict the genetics of future offspring, and you can see this GIF as it's running along here. And the idea is we use a Punnett square to complete a monohybrid cross. So what we do is we take the 2 parents and their genotypes that we have worked out or we have been given, and we put their genes across, well, for one parent goes across the top, and so in this example here we've got the hairy guinea pig is going to be big H, okay, and then we've got the other parent down the bottom, and that parent is going to be little h, and that's the hairless, the bald guinea pig. What we then do is we fill in the rest of the boxes, okay. It's going through all of them, so it's going through all of the, there we go. Okay, so we've got 2 heterozygous guinea pigs there. The idea is 2 heterozygous guinea pigs, we fill in the H's with the boxes that they're opposite, so we end up with big H, 2 big H, little h's, and 1 little h. So we end up with 3 hairy guinea pigs and 1 hairless guinea pig. Okay.
But we're about to go through another example that's not on the GIF that changes.
So it should work. I'm going to let this run through a couple of times actually and see if you can work out what's going on inside of it, because it runs faster than I can talk it.
Yeah, it is only going through 2 cycles of things.
It's going through 3, isn't it?
Oh,
yeah,
it is. No, it is going through 3.
Yeah, it's going through 2 heterozygous parents, 2 heterozygous and a homozygous parent, and a homozygous and a homozygous parent. So it's running through 3 cycles of them. Yeah. So we'll let it run one more time. So this one here, this is using 2 heterozygous parents, and this is how the box is filled in. And each box is showing the possible children that are being created by breeding these 2 things together, and then the chances at the side of showing each child being produced. This is heterozygous and a homozygous parent breeding together.
Homozygous recessive.
And again, this is showing the chances of producing each type of offspring. And this is showing two homozygous, so a homozygous dominant and a homozygous recessive. And that's the ratios that you get. Okay, so we'll go into a little bit more detail of this, but you can replay that little section as many times as you need.
Now, the best way to practice these is just by doing examples, and past papers being the key example. We're going to go through one more example here with you. It's using the best trait in the world, so it's using the ginger hair trait, which is a recessive one. So basically, and you will know this if you see any ginger families, they're often like the Weasleys. They are all ginger. My family is all ginger. We all have the recessive trait, and that is because you need 2 copies of it for you to have that trait. And if 2 ginger people are having a baby, it is 100% chance that their child is going to have ginger hair because they only have the recessive trait. But if a ginger hair and someone who is not ginger have a baby, that's when it gets a little bit different. So ginger is a recessive trait shown by the little g, whereas people who don't have ginger hair, so maybe they have brown hair, they would have a dominant trait, which is the capital G. So if a ginger woman has a child with a heterozygous man, what is their chances of having a ginger baby? This is kind of your stereotypical question on this. So the woman who has ginger hair, she's going to be homozygous recessive, so little g, little g. The man who's heterozygous, who is not ginger, is going to be big G, little g. So if we put this into our monohybrid cross, we put the woman across the top, so our 2 little g's, we put the man down the side, which is our big G and our little g, and if we start to fill that out as we go. So the first traits, it shows a heterozygous, so a big G and a little g. Similarly for the next one, big G, little g. Then we've got two homozygous recessive ones will be produced, so little g, and another little g, little g. And if we think about this in terms of chances of them actually having a baby that is ginger, well, we have two potential chances of it being heterozygous, so not ginger, and also we have 2 chances of it being homozygous, so it being ginger. So it's a 50-50 chance that you've got there. So it's a 2 to 2, which you could simplify down to 1 to 1, which is a 50% chance of the child being ginger, but also 50% chance of the child not being ginger. But again, practice. Do the past paper questions. Ask your teacher for help. It is the best way to get through this stuff.
Yep. You might not be given information like this person is big G or this person is little g. It might just be told a ginger woman has a child with heterozygous ginger hair is recessive, and you have to work out yourself, okay, the woman must be little g, the man must be big G, little g. So you have to, it's understanding the vocabulary is key to understanding how to do these problems.
And if they give you a letter in the question, you use that letter. You do not choose a letter yourself, because if you use the wrong letter, even if you do it correctly, you use the wrong letter, you lose the marks.
Yep, all of them. I had somebody who used an F when they were supposed to use D in exam papers and had to just take away all the marks. Okay, so even though we can predict the ratio, so in the previous example, a 50-50 chance of producing a ginger child, it might be that that couple produce 100% ginger children in real life, okay? The reason for this is, every single time you produce a child, you roll the dice, okay? Now that means that fertilization essentially is random. It's a random sperm meets a random egg. All we can do is predict the chances of it happening. Technically, it is possible with a dice to roll 16 sixes in a row. It's unlikely, but it is possible. Okay, if we similarly look at male to female ratios, it is according to genetics, you are supposed to produce exactly 50% males and exactly 50% females. Now think of some families that you know about. Are the children exactly half boys and half girls? No. The reason for that is fertilization is random. However, we look at the country as a whole, yes, it's about 50-50 when we scale that up. But again, it's random sperm meeting random eggs, and that idea means that we will not really see the ratios applied in real life very often, except in my family, where we do actually have perfect little ratios, except for the boy-girl thing, is we do actually have perfect ratios of 4 children, each showing, 1 is showing all the recessive characteristics, and 3 of us are all showing dominant characteristics, which I find quite fun.
Okay, so the final thing we're going to touch on in this is the idea of family trees. Now, these are coming up in questions more and more often because they are a really good show of do you understand what is going on or do you not. So family tree, you've probably seen one before, but it basically shows how your family is linked. And quite often you're going to get one of these where it will state some genotypes and phenotypes of certain people, and you have to figure out the other people based on that. But what you need to know is a few things. So you need to know that the first generation is known as the P generation, which stands for the parental generation. The second generation is known as the F1 generation, and another generation under that, so basically the grandchildren of P, are known as the F2 generation. Now you will be asked to know P, F1, F2. It doesn't matter where you start at, the first generation will always be P. Second generation always F1, third generation always F2. So it doesn't matter if it's grandparents, great-grandparents, whatever. The other thing that's always important to note is please remember that, so like in this example, in the F1 generation, the person labelled father and the person labelled aunt are not genetically related to grandfather and grandmother. They are married in. Please realise that. Don't get it wrong, because someone does every year. They think that because they're married, suddenly magically share genetics with the grandparents. They don't. Please don't get that fact wrong.
Okay, now to give the example in this one, the P generation is Abe Simpson, Mona Simpson, Clancy Bouvier, and Jacqueline Bouvier. The F1 generation is Herb and Homer, Marge, Patty, and Selma. And the F2 generation is Bart, Lisa, Maggie, and Ling?
Ling.
Okay.
But Ling is adopted, so kind of a bit iffy to all of this because she will not share any of the genetics of any of the other people in it. But it was just to get the idea of this is a family tree you probably know of, and there's the generations within them.
So exam question examples, like the one we had the last exam that actually happened was name all the people in the F1 generation. So you would have had to name Bart, Lisa, Maggie, and Ling. You would have had to name all of them. Sorry, F2 generation. Okay, so you would have had to name all of those people. If you were asked to name all of the people in the F1 generation, it'd be Herb, Homer, Marge, Patty, and Selma. Okay, and again, remembering this idea that Homer and Marge are not genetically related to each other, okay? The idea is that horizontal line shows they marry each other. Any downward lines from them is showing them passing on genetics.
Okay, so that is the end of this video. There's a lot in it, and by all means, we have not really covered it all as well as we can, because it's one of these ones where just doing past papers and asking your teachers for help is the best way to get through this. But we've talked to you a lot of words, so you should now be able to define phenotype, genotype, allele, dominant, recessive, heterozygous, homozygous, the P generation, the F1 generation, and the F2 generation. And if you can do all them, these questions are going to be a whole lot easier for you.
Okay, and it's about using those definitions to solve genetic problems. That is the skill you have to be able to do. Naming the stuff above isn't enough in terms of exam stuff. You need to be able to use those definitions to solve genetic problems.
You need to be able to predict the genotype of offspring based on phenotype or genotype of parents. So basically be able to do a monohybrid cross to say this is the chances of them having these babies.
And you need to be able to identify relationships in family trees. So just along the lines of PF1, F2, but also know that these people have married each other, these people are the children of these people are the grandparents of these people. So it's all just worth practice. That's all we can recommend for it. Get your hands on as many past paper questions as you can on this topic. It will be worth it because it's more than likely to appear in the exam. The SQA love it as a topic because it mixes application of your knowledge with just plain, actual using your knowledge type stuff, which they really, really love application of knowledge questions. The next key area I have utterly forgotten. Is it heart?
It's transpiration, isn't it?
Is it transpiration? Is it plant transport?
Plant transport, then animal transport, then absorption of materials.
Okay, so that's what we're looking at. So 3 key areas to go. And yeah, we're looking at plant transport next. So how does stuff move around a plant without it having a heart? See you then.
So 3 more? Yeah, there's only 3 more.